I'm Gary Hedge. I joined the company in 1967, and prior to that, I had worked with International Harvester in Peoria, Illinois, and I retired in 2000, so that gives me about 33 years in the business. I have a son who you will hear from later, and he has like 30 years in the business. Had another son that had 40 years of business, who's retiring this year. And I have a daughter who had 10 years and her husband who had 20 years. So we feel like we had like 135 years of hedge time with Birkey's. And it was a fruitful time.
I'm Ron Birkey. I started with the company in 1977. Prior to that, I'd worked for International Harvester also in the Quad Cities. Started in 77 and retired in 2000 at the end of 2012 after 36 years. Started out working in the Paxson store and managed stores for 20 years. And when Gary retired, took over there. And then Mike passed the baton to Mike after I retired in 2012.
I'm Mike Hedge. I came to Birkey's in 1992. Actually, my dad convinced me to come back from being gone and out of state to be kind of the first CFO of the company as the company went from 4 to 7 locations. And so, I worked for Dad from 1992 to 2000, and then Ron stepped in and I worked for him from 2000 through 2012. And so I was a chief financial officer for about 21 years, and then the last 10 years from 2013 to 23, I was the president and CEO here.
As I said, I started in 1967. We moved to Rantoul from Peoria, Morton on Memorial Day weekend, and went to work the next day. Most of my time was spent there in Rantoul was in the sales department. And we sold a lot. Rantoul was the number one dealership for several years prior to me coming in, and we maintained that for a couple of years there. We were number one combine dealer in the region at that time. We were number one volume dealer at that time. We sold more conditioners when they came out than anybody. We sold 2+2 tractors at Paxton, and we sold more 2+2 tractors than any dealership in the area. So that was some of our accomplishments that we had. And we had really a good base of coverage for farmers. And in Champaign County at that time, there was not a John Deere dealership. Well, there was one, but he wasn't active. And so we had a market share pretty well tied up in that area. Can't say that today. It's a little tougher.
When did you get Steiger?
Oh, well, as far as things that happened during my time there, one of the first things that we always did a good job of putting on introductions of new products and so forth, and we did several. We did one with the 806 series tractor, and we had quite a presentation before it was all over. Then we decided we needed a bigger tractor, and we found the Steiger tractor to be available to us. And we were the earliest dealer in east of the Mississippi River. That was our territory, was the whole eastern half of the United States. We did sell some in Indiana and around, and I don't know the exact number we sold, but probably close to 100 Steiger tractors. And that gave us a good lift into some big equipment that otherwise we couldn't sell in our area because nobody had a tractor big enough to pull them. And we were always thinking to try to do something different, to be a little different than every dealer. And we went through a period making corn planters. There was no Euro white corn planters available, and we purchased 8-row narrow planters and wind them out, and I think we sold 6 that spring. And we were always a really good planter dealer in our area at that time, which was Paxton and Rantoul. Another thing that I got involved in is I was in the Implement Dealer Association, and we were looking to have, the association was looking for a place to have a farm show, and Gordy Hannigan, a local auctioneer up there, had one the prior first year there, and it was kind of a bomb deal. And anyway, I ran into him on Sunday morning after church at a restaurant, and we struck up a deal, and I presented it to the board in Wisconsin, and Gordy approved it. So that's why we started the show in Gordyville, and that's been going on 25 years, I guess, probably. And that was a successful venture.
I had worked for International Harvester in the Quad Cities in sales and marketing. And, I always had a thought in the back of my mind that if it worked out, I would be able to come back to the business, Birkey's business. And that played itself out. And I came back and started in sales in Paxton for about 6 months. And I thought I was going to sell for a couple of years or something, but Gary and Dad and the group decided that they were going to add a store in Hoopston. So my Uncle Kelly, who was the manager of Paxton, went to Hoopston. I became the manager of Paxton, and I did that till '84. And then he and I switched stores. I went back over to Hoopston in 1984, and then in 1998 I came to Rantoul as the ag sales manager, and then when Gary retired, I took over that position as president CEO. I think of stories. One that stands out in my mind in 1977, and Gary alluded to it a little bit. International Harvester came out with a concept tractor, the 2+2, which was different than the Steiger tractors, the big four-wheel drives that Rantoul had sold for quite a while. It was a tractor that had the cab on the back. So that concept was new and different. We decided we were going to have to really present this in the right way to the customer in order to be successful. So we decided to have some product shows and skits, and we did. Bob Stalter we put those on at each one of the 3 stores at that time, Hoopston, Rantoul, and Paxton. And Bob Stalter was the IH salesman, and I was the John Deere salesman, and Wayne Coffin, another owner, was the farmer. So we put those skits on, but we followed up after that in those presentations with on-farm demonstrations. We did a lot of that. Gary can attest, we always did a lot of demonstrations of product in order to be successful. And anyway, we demonstrated that, and I got a call from the district manager who got to look, and we had sold at Paxton about 50 of them or so after a period of time. And he called and said that he got to looking in researching, and we had sold more than anybody in the world, any other dealer in the world. So we got a couple plaques, and really that was Bob Stalter, as Gary can attest. Bob was a great salesman and really believed in that concept, and went out and made it happen. So that's a story that I remember very well. So.
Well, I graduated from college at the University of Illinois here in Champaign with an accounting degree. At the time I graduated, there probably were really not CPAs and accountants in farm equipment dealerships. So I went on to work for the world's largest accounting firm for a few years. Spent some time in industry away from here in Dallas and Phoenix. And then in early '92, Dad indicated that Birkey's was going to be growing from 4 to 7 or 5 to 7 stores. They'd added one in '91, gone from 4 to 5, and they were going to add a few more that year. And had the foresight to know that it was probably time to have somebody be responsible for the finance, the accounting, and really helping to work that side of the business. And I was at a time of transition in the company I was with, that they were closing their office down, wanted me to move to Miami, which wasn't very appealing at the time. And I think I went with you to a Weber meeting prior to joining the company, just to kind of get my my feet wet and see what things were all about. And so did that. And so my first day on the job was July 1st of 1992. And Birkey's had merged with McGrath Farm Equipment, which was Bloomington or Hudson at the time in Gibson City. And so my first day was the first day that those two new stores were added in. And so the challenge when I walked in was Birkey's had never had a financial guy, an accounting guy, and I don't think a lot of the guys knew what to do with me, right? Is that fair? So it was really an uphill battle with some of the guys. As the company had merged, all these guys had been individual entrepreneurs in their own way, and yet as the company grew and went up to 7 stores, we had to have a mindset that was more focused and operated like a complex rather than 7 individual stores. And so that I walked in the first day, and we had 3 different computer systems. We had charts of accounts that were different at every single location. We had 7 stores that were trying to manage their cash flow not very well. I remember at times, as we grew, we probably weren't capitalized well enough as we should be. But it was quite a challenging time for a couple of years, and eventually we got all the computer systems merged into one. We got a consistent chart of accounts. We began to have some monthly reporting. We dealt with kind of the cash management so that we swept all the money into a single location, and it kind of began to set us up for where we are today. There's no way that we could continue to grow without some of the underlying support. And we worked through some very challenging times. I would say those 94, 95, outside of maybe some times you had probably in the late 70s, were pretty tough, right?
Oh, yeah. The 80s.
In the 80s, early 80s. That 94, 95 time frame was very challenging. A lot of things have not changed with the manufacturer. They were pushing inventory. We were putting it to rental fleets, which was going on our balance sheet. And we weren't moving them off the balance sheet fast enough. And so we really had a cash drain and some other things going on. And there was a lot of challenges. And then we were still trying to get used to how do we operate as a single complex from 7 stores. And it took a number of years for us to get there. But after we kind of went through the downturn, I think we all realized what we needed to do to kind of work together as a complex with inventories and some other things. And I think, we were probably one of the earliest pioneers as equipment dealers that looked at the complex inventories. It was available across any location to sell. We looked at our parts inventory as one inventory. We tried to begin moving parts. And eventually, we kind of got control of that, and it really set us up for the large amount of growth that we had starting in like 2001 when we started plucking off all those acquisitions.
Yeah. When we went over to Galesburg, that was a big change for us because we had not reached outside of our traditional territory, and that was outside of that certainly. But it also gave us an opportunity to figure out how we were going to manage the growth and in terms of personnel and different people doing it. When we went to Galesburg, we didn't really have anyone that was really assigned to specific tasks relative to that kind of acquisition. And but in time, and right soon after that, we started putting people in place to have specific responsibilities and called on a lot of the other stores to help us. But and as we grew from there, it became, when we added Polo and Prophetstown, it became real easy to plug them in. And subsequent to that, the other stores fell into place a lot easier than it was when we added Galesburg back in 2001.
And the other thing that we had to go through that was challenging in the middle 90s was just how we're going to support the organization, from the accounting to the human resources and payroll and marketing. All those things had been done out at every location. And so we started a central office in the old Rantoul building, and we worked on a few functions at a time, and we brought payroll in. If I remember right, we had stores paying their payrolls on all different kinds of cycles, and they were doing it individually at the stores. And with the complex, it became very difficult to manage the tax reporting and a lot of those kind of things. So we consolidated that. We consolidated the accounts payable, probably taking the checkbook away from a lot of the individual stores and doing it centrally. That was a hurdle I think we had to overcome, and how we dealt with the accounts receivable and those kind of things. There was just a lot of transition that really had to happen. It was some very heavy lifting in those years from 92 to probably 96 or 7. But those were the times that really kind of set the organization up and positioned us to kind of move forward and do what we've done for the last 25 years.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did in the 2000 range, as we had a number of stores, without Mike's expertise that brought in a great set of skills that we didn't have, and helped us, led the charge to establish the structure that he talked about in the 90s that really allowed us then to be able to put together the growth that we did. So it's
kind of strange, because in my early days as president of the company, and we had 4 stores at the time, was to see that there was enough money in the bank accounts to pay for the goods we'd sold. And we juggled money, and it was quite a chore to try to track things and figure things down. And when Mike got things centralized, well, I didn't have to do that anymore, and that was fun. And then another big challenge we put the computer system in. And that time we had 3 stores, right? And I put the computer system in.
Dad's.
And my other son, Jeff, who will be retiring this year with 40 years with the company, when he got out of college, he decided he wanted to work for Birkey's, and I was wanting him to spend a few years outside before he came into the business. But he had a girlfriend and this sort of thing, ball players and so forth, that he wanted to stay in the area. And I said, okay, Jeff, you can stay and we'll take you in, but you got to be in charge of this computer system. And he did, and spent many hours with that and trying to oversee it and find a job with it. But that was quite an undertaking. We put everybody under with the computers. And anyway, then we added the construction equipment when we bought Mattoon in, and Jeff went over to the side of managing the construction equipment then. But a lot of changes, not only, and then we worked for the store in Urbana, Rantoul in Urbana, and 2 of the biggest volume dealers in Illinois merged. And we moved into his building, was way lacking in space and everything to operate. That's when we made the decision we should build a new store in Champaign. And that was a lot of over the road stuff to be done, and it was quite an undertaking to get that handled. Well, at the time, we had a service manager, Ellis, Turk, Birkey, and he was a little different guy. He could fix about anything. He could build his own TV, build his own radios and sort of thing. But he always had a challenge, somebody else couldn't fix. Bring it to him and he'd get it handled. And so we were up in that way, because some of the products we had, like the 315 combine, for instance, which wasn't a very big hit, and we decided it's a machine we had to sell, so we bought 6 of them to sell. And needless to say, they were 6 basket cases. And we spent weekends and Sunday afternoons working on farmers on them combines, trying to make them work. And thanks to Ellis, he come through and made some belt tighteners and different things that we added to the machines and made them workable. And so from like the 8-row planter, we went to make them 8-row narrow to 8-row wide. And he was able to do the welding to straighten them out. And we could do things like that other dealers wouldn't attempt to do. And They brought us, like the Steiger tractor, brought us in touch with larger farmers. And a lot of those farmers needed bigger tools to pull behind that. And we were able to supply them, and that got us in touch and made new customers out of some of those people that maybe lived 50 miles from our store. And we were pretty innovative in getting a good product out that the farmer could really make some money with.
If you go back to the early days, I think after the war, my dad was an Alice Chalmers dealer manager in the town of Fisher, where the business started in '46 through 1954, and as Gary mentioned, Turk was a marvelous mechanic, a genius mechanic. And Marv was also an excellent mechanic, and they worked together as the two older brothers of Dad's, and they had a Birkey service facility in Fisher where they strictly worked on service and had a great reputation and a great business. And then a dealer in Dewey, Illinois, Jones, went out of business in 1953, and so I know Dad tells the story. He got the idea that he wanted to see if he could get that contract. So he drove up to Kankakee, and the regional manager up there said, well, this is interesting. He said, I had two other Birkeys come in yesterday that were interested in it. So when Dad got back home, they got together, the three of them, and added another partner to give them four people that started, Jack Magilton, and that was in 1954. March 1st. 1954 is when they signed the contract for the International Harvester franchise in Fisher. So that was kind of the start of it, I guess. And then, but rapidly they found that the business was the International Harvester business was big territory. Customer territory was in the Royal, Flatville, Rantoul East area. So they closed the dealership there after a few years, and then in 1959 opened the store in Rantoul. And then Gary and Kelly, another brother, Kelly Birkey, joined the company. And well, he had been with the company, he joined the ownership in '67 along with Gary at that time. So that was kind of the early evolution. But it came out of the service capabilities of those brothers, I think, to start with. And Turk, like Gary was indicating, was kind of the leader of that. I mean, he was phenomenal. So
Now, what was the Thomasboro location?
well, Thomasboro was added in '56, and it was just I think it was Stewart's Garage, and Thomasboro had a dealership, and they went out of business. And so to aid and supplement that servicing for that area over in the Rantoul area that we were talking about, we had to have some facility over there. So we took over that dealership and had a service, basically kind of a service center there in Thomasboro in the old dealership. And it became evident that wasn't going to work. So they sold Fisher and Thomasboro and merged that operation, so to speak, into Rantoul in 1959 and built the new store there. My dad was he was actually the mayor of Fisher and the manager of this dealership, but he didn't own it. And Turk and Marv had a service business that was service oriented, but hadn't operated a major franchise of a line. So I think the company wanted somebody that had some business experience, supposedly ownership experience in that level. And Jack Magilton had a business in town, and they kind of looked at that as an additional benefit, and so they added him into the group. And the company, the International Harvester Company, recognized that they needed somebody with that background. But anyway, that's how he came in.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they decided to find something else for Jack to do. So they took on the Rambler Agency at Rantoul.
Yeah.
And we later then, in Williamsport, our volume wasn't quite what we thought it should be. And we had a chance to take the Chrysler Dodge Jeep franchise on. We did that, and we were thinking, we had so many employees and so forth, we bought a lot of vehicles on our own.
We were our best customer.
Yeah, and anyway, we did that, and then later on, we moved that over to Attica in a standalone Lincoln dealership that had gone out of business. And of course, when we merged with McGrath, we also inherited the Chevrolet Buick franchise. So at that point, we didn't have the Rambler anymore, but we had Chrysler and the GM, and it was just about all we could do to handle it. It was all we were doing was trading dollars. And at the end of the year, we weren't really making anything out of it. So we decided to dissolve the Chrysler dealership, and then we sold the Buick dealership in Gibson City. And so we had a little foray in the auto business, and none of us were really good at it.
Yeah, we just didn't have the volume
Yeah.
that we needed, and frankly, we didn't have the focus. We were so focused on the ag business that it was kind of a afterthought a little bit as far as how we tried to manage that business.
Well, in the auto business, they make the money out of the front end of the business, the sales side, and we couldn't. And we were small town car dealers and couldn't sell the volume that really brought us to critical mass to bring the bottom line where it needed to be. But it was a great thing for us. It was an opportunity to try to see what could work. But we didn't sell Ford. We never sold Fords, but we sold all the other brands that America made. We were an International Harvester dealer, Rambler dealer, full line Chrysler dealer, and Chevrolet Buick dealer. So we handled a little bit of everything over time. But the best thing we did was probably decide that wasn't what we could do well. So anyway.
Back to making margins on goods and how we used to hold goods to support our company. I remember when I first started selling, of course everybody had to sell, and I went down to my area at Rantoul and had one of my buddies that I grew up with, and he wanted to buy an 806 diesel tractor, and he wanted a good price because that way if I gave him a good price, he'd buy all his equipment from us later on when he got to be a big farmer. I think I made him come and drive it home because I couldn't afford to hire a trucker to haul it out to him, but I think it was less than $100 that I made on that tractor. And certainly after that, had another neighbor friend that wanted to buy a 303 combine and grain head and corn head, and there again, well, the sale on that tractor was $6,000. The sale on this combine was $10,000. And I think on that one we made $125 on that combine sale. And so my start in the retail business, I wasn't a whiz bang like I thought I was. And but we finally learned how do you manage and supervise so you can make a buck on what you sell. And we did. We were selling high volume, low profit, and we made it work.
International Harvester as a company, had a great. They had a great organization, a great sales organization, but had some fiscal issues for sure, certain. And through the late 70s and the early 80s, when the interest rates went up extremely high, put a big burden on any company that had large number of assets, and International Harvester just had a real problem. Eventually, International Harvester Company sold the ag assets to Tenneco, and Tenneco had a number of companies, and one of their companies was Case, and the Case brand, and so their plan was, and it happened obviously, that they merged those two brands together to form Case IH, and that's really how it happened at that time. So we became a Case IH dealer because we were selected. There was a process where some of those Case dealers didn't get the new contract. Some of the IH dealers didn't get the new contract. We were fortunate to maintain our contracts in our area. So.
That was what year?
1984.
Yeah.
Well, it was actually, the announcement was made in November of 84, but the actual transition on paper, so to speak, was February 1st, 1985.
out of all of our locations, I think all of them were International Harvester
Right. At that time.
At the time, and then in '91 we merged with Oakland Farm Supply, who had been the lone Case dealer, who had then become a Case International.
Yeah, they'd been a Case dealer actually before us. 1947, I think, was your grandpa Quint became was the dealership. Had the dealership there in Oakland, and still that same dealership in Oakland.
I think one thing that has, over the years, helped to solidify Birkey's reputation and success is how engaged we have been with our manufacturer, right? I think through all three of us, we've all been engaged with dealer councils and serving on different boards and committees that the company has had. I was on the dealer advisory board for probably the last 9 or 10 years of my career, as well as some committees prior to that, and served as the president of the North America Dealership Association for 2 or 3 years toward at the end of that cycle. And I know you guys can talk about your engagement as well.
Well, I was president of the dealer council in the 80s, and then again in the 2000s, the period in there. And I know, Gary, you were on dealer council, I think, back in the 70s or in that period of time, in 80s, sometime in there. So we all, as Mike mentioned, we all had an active role in working with the company to better the company. We helped, and also obviously provide benefits for the dealer along the way. But that communication process was very, very critical and vital, and it helped us as an individual dealer, because we had those relationships with the top management of the company. I think that helped us a lot.
Yeah, a lot of dealers aren't necessarily in sync with the manufacturer, and I think the thing that I think I understood and we understood is they've got their business to run, we've got ours, and why we're joined as it relates to product and services and those kind of things. We each have different goals, and if we can respect those things and find some common ground, I think that's how we move the business forward. And I think that's kept us in a good relationship with the manufacturers that maybe sometimes other dealers don't have. And I think, to this day, I think Birkey's is a dealership they look at that is highly committed to, and they're very committed to us and our growth. And being that we are kind of a franchised organization and connected with them, if we hadn't maintained that connection to them and been in their good graces, a lot of the opportunities that we've had to grow wouldn't have come our way.
Right. The three-legged chair of the customer and us as a dealer and the company. We recognize that, just as Mike's saying, they've got their priorities and they've got to be successful. We've got to be successful. But if we are each keeping the other's goals and needs in mind, we can work together to satisfy and take care of the customer. And like Mike said, when opportunities became available to grow our business or add stores, they came to us first, and to see if we would be interested in getting involved in it. And I'm sure because of the background that Mike mentioned and the recognition of those principles that he's talking about, it helped put us in the right position for them to call on us.
One thing you talked about in the Case, how did we become a IH dealer from a Case dealer? Before we got into really selling red IH type equipment, we sold a number of Case tractors painted red. And during that period, they had a really blowout special on them. And we went to Marco Island, and we were 3 of our stores, Paxton, Rantoul, and Hubston. Out of the top 50 dealers, we were in 3 spots out of the 150, 107 dealers. But we could sell whatever, and we did. We sold a lot of those red Case tractors.
Well, in my tenure, and we're in a cyclical business, right? And there are definitely good times, and there are some very challenging times in our business. And I would say we went through 2 or 3 cycles in my 32 years that we were here. As I mentioned before, I think those first years for me in the early 90s when I first came were extremely challenging, not only because we had the dynamics of moving from single store operators, entrepreneurs, to a mentality of a complex, but when we did those mergers, we really weren't prepared from a capitalization standpoint to manage what was ahead of us. As Dad said, back in the old days, everybody kind of looks at their checkbook, and if they had enough to pay the bills at the end of the month, things were okay. But the dynamics of the industry about the time I came in, and you guys can speak to this, but in the earlier years, I think the manufacturer put all that inventory on your lot, and they really didn't charge you a lot to do that, and it could sit until you sold it, right?
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a need for bank financing a lot and outside financing because the manufacturer pretty much floated you whatever you need to cash flow the business. But about the time I came, we didn't have relationships with the banks because we hadn't made kind of ongoing sustained profits. And then when we merged the dealers, because there had been no profits, there wasn't a lot of equity in the business. And so as that floor planning became interest bearing, as it needed to get paid off on high interest rate credit lines with the manufacturer, it was important and incumbent on us to figure out how do we find relationships with the banks to provide some of the financing. And I remember Dad and I had multiple conversations. Well, why don't the banks like us and other things? And I'm like, well, you got to do 2 or 3 things. You got to have very consistent, ongoing financial reporting that you tell them the good and the bad. You've got to make sustained annual profits and retain those in the business. And there was a little bit of the mentality that, we don't like to pay taxes, so we, don't want to earn too much money. And you got to kind of have this relationship with them that is very open and transparent, and then the balance sheet has to be properly leveraged. And those things took a lot of time to seep through the organization because at the point I came, I was a CPA coming from industry and seeing all these balance sheet ratios and managing this. Everybody else in the organization was a salesperson, basically. And from a sales aspect, what do? You sell. But I think what we found out is as we continued to sell new equipment, what happened is we loaded up on the used equipment. We didn't turn it fast enough, and a lot of cash ended up being on the lot in used equipment, and the values of those things over time depreciated and went down, and it caused a lot of stress in the organization. So we had to figure out how to navigate that through. And then besides that was the whole dealer-owned rental yard, Dory, that program that Case had, which was throw it on the balance sheet.
Right.
And, it made the problem worse. And probably no different than it was in 2011 or 12, or what we're facing now is the manufacturers got their thing to do. Their thing to do is to put the dealers on, give the dealers inventory, push that off of theirs. And, in those days, it was pushed off on our balance sheet in this rental yard that we couldn't rent enough. It was just a way for us to figure out how to retail it. In 2014, they were overproducing tractors and everything else, and the market went down 50%, and they're still shoving inventory down our throat. And now we're in that kind of slow down time again of, they continue to send us new inventory. We keep selling it, and the used kind of backs up a little bit. So those difficult times really helped, mold what we needed to do for the future as a complex to create good reporting, to create sustained profits, and then to create this kind of transparency. And we did that over probably a period of about 4 or 5 years, from about 92 to 96 or 7. And once we came out of the other side of that, and I think everybody in the organization realized that we couldn't continue to do what we did, then we got all together from a mindset about how do we manage this as one inventory, how do we do cost analysis right on our trades. There was just a lot of progress that was made there, but that was a very challenging time for our organization that really, we had to kind of backstep and sidestep a lot of things till we worked through that. But we did.
The elimination of the redundancies of multiple individual dealerships, as Mike alluded to earlier, was critical. And then just figuring out those components of our business that were not run as efficiently and properly. And so we made those changes as well. And the two together created a lot of the dynamics that Mike's talking about. I think back in terms of the cyclical side of this business, which you have to be very aware of that if you're going to be successful, because you'll go out there and think that you have some good years and you think this is great, and then you make poor decisions that put you out of business in the future. But when I came into business in '77, had come off the Birkey's business had come off, and the industry had come off about 4 years of excellent, tremendous business, successful business. And I remember when I sat down as an owner, along with 3 or other guys that had just bought in, Dad said we had an off year, so to speak, in 1978. And Dad said, "Well, now this is more like what it's going to be like. This is real. That what we had was not really real. This is more real." And I can tell you that was the best year we had until 1990. So the 80s were a challenge, and it had a lot to do with the high interest rates. Like Mike alluded to, it affects you. If you have high inventories, it's going to kill you. And it was hard on every dealer, and certainly hard on us. But through all these other transitions that Mike spoke of, we merged out of the 80s, those high interest periods. And
We couldn't have done all this if it wouldn't have been for our stable base of employees.
yeah.
We had a great group of employees, and to do that, we decided to install a 401k plan. And we were rather generous in how we matched dollars to the employees. In fact, I think as of this point, there's over $50 million in that account that belongs to our employees. And when they retire, I just still get calls or in contact with people who just can't get over how much they accumulated over the years that were in that plan. And rightfully so, it didn't really cost us much if you really think about it. And those the costs were all taken out there, and we could have made more margin if we didn't have a 401k plan.
Yeah.
By the same token, we could have lost some people.
Right. We had our success was centered around having great employees.
Yeah, that's one thing that, I think as we've done things over the years, we've gone through these cycles, and there's a lot of other dealers that have removed a lot of employees from their employment. They've eliminated benefits like the 401k plan. They've eliminated vacation time. We as an organization always have seen our employees as probably the most valuable asset that we have, and certainly something that helps differentiate us from some of our competitors. And we have worked hard in those down cycles to maintain the engagement of our employees and to keep them fully employed and continue on with the benefits. And I think over the years that has served us well. We've had many employees that have worked 20, 30, 40, some 50 years at Birkey's. And it's great to be a part of an organization that puts stock in the employees. And I think we took another step in 21 as we were looking for some exit strategies for our owner group, to actually move the ownership of the company into an ESOP where now we're 100% employee owned. And certainly that will take some time to get some traction. We're seeing some initial out of the box benefits that with share values and some other things. But I think in the long run, not only do we have that 401k that Dad was instrumental in setting up and the matches and those things, now we've got shares going to all of our employees on an annual basis that is going to further grow our employees' ability to work here, in long term and retire with a nice nest egg.
Yeah, the environment that we've created over the years, I think, for the employee has additionally given certain employees an opportunity to grow in terms of position change. As we added stores, we placed a lot of our top people in some of those stores to get them going. They'd been with the company, they'd shown great talents, and we recognize that by promoting them in. So it gave them some great opportunities that maybe a single outlet dealership doesn't provide those opportunities for individual growth. And so we were real proud of that. And we benefited as owners. It was a payback for us because we were able to start a good operation that understood the way we did business and implemented the policies that we had and helped to grow our business in those new locations. So it was a win-win for both us and the employees at that point. I mean, I think we always looked at opportunities. We always challenged our board to think about opportunities to grow outside of the business. What could we do outside of the normal course of business? And but we still kept coming back to that the core business, and then sometimes companies fail because they try to diversify too much, and we still tried to obviously hone in on the core of our business, and we're successful, I guess, in doing that.
Yeah, from a geographic standpoint, given that we have to get these contracts from Case IH for the farm equipment dealerships, for the construction dealerships, they are looking and wanting dealers to grow contiguous to their territory. So over the years, that's pretty much what we've done. Unless there's a market that is really in need, someone going out of business, nobody interested, they generally will not let you jump over 4 or 5 dealers to purchase a complex somewhere else.
And then Galesburg was a good example of that, where we jumped across.
But the challenge is that, we would have, if we bought a complex that's, say, 200 miles away, is, how do we engage the culture? How do we get the Birkey way of doing business put in place? And I think our general bias has always been, if they're contiguous and close and on the edges of our territory, we can bring our people from neighboring stores in. It's much easier to take somebody that's working at one of our stores and promote them into a role at these new locations.
They're more likely to move.
More likely to move. And it was always difficult when we thought about opportunities that are 2 or 3 states away, as far as how do we get some of the management team, how do we handle some of the things that we do as an organization, that's somewhere states away.
Yeah, a good example would have been in the one of the hallmarks of what we had tried to do was provide the best parts service that we could provide. The fast-moving inventory is easy to handle, but the slow-moving inventory, which is a vast majority of your total inventory, is very difficult to manage, and you never really have the right 1 or 2 pieces on hand when the customer comes in. So we supplemented that. We've supplemented that over the years with a shuttle system that daily shuttle system, moving parts around, and that also played into the issue of why we didn't go 200 or 300 miles away, because we had that contiguous location operation, and it provided the network whereby we could implement that sharing of inventories a lot easier and provide then a superior service to the customer. So that was one of the reasons. As an example, retirement.
I was real good friends with the dealer at Polo of Prophetstown. I was a good friend of mine. And over the years, he had begged me to come up there and include them in our dealership. But there again, we had all these dealers in between. And nobody else wanted to do it. I would have probably done it, but nobody else really wanted to do it. But it's turned out to be a real good deal. So, you just, some do and some don't.
Well, I think the one thing, Dad, that was part of your tenure is, I think you in some ways were a visionary as far as growing this kind of multi-dealer complex. There weren't, you had 2 stores, right? but you eventually went to 5 and you went to 7 and those kind of things, which really wasn't something that was
A lot of dealers were doing. You're right.
a lot of dealers were doing, right? And I would say you were on the forefront of recognizing that you needed somebody like me to come in from a financial standpoint when very few dealers had any financial
Right.
capacity in-house,
Very
right?
definitely. Very definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I alluded earlier, Gary alluded earlier, talk about points in time. Certainly, adding the Steiger franchise in '69 was huge.
Right.
International Harvester had dabbled around with four-wheel drives, didn't dabble correctly, and there was Steiger and Versatile and different ones that emerged early on, and so I know Dad and Gary went up to Fargo, if I remember right, and long story short, got the contract, and like he said, became the first dealer east of the Mississippi, and that was a great time for the company, and a good time because of the economic success that farmers were having in the early '70s. That also played into it. It allowed you to sell a lot.
Along that same line, we've never mentioned Kubota,
Yeah,
but we've been a Kubota dealer for quite a number of years.
Yeah, since
That's
the
exactly
80s.
when we took
Yeah.
it on. And we struggle with that thing. We really struggle with it and sell 1 or 2 a year. But now it's a pretty good sized part of the business. I know I drive by these stores every now and then, so I kind of check to see what they're doing. And I drove by our banner last fall, and there was a line of Kubota tractors that reached from 150 to 130, and I couldn't believe it. I guess they're getting some of them sold. So, but that's been a good deal for us, really.
I think that from an internal standpoint, there's pluses and minuses, but I think one of the pluses to having multiple owners, that no one has a controlling interest in the company. I think the benefit of that is only the good ideas come to the top. If an owner has an idea that's a little off base, they're certainly called out for it or, challenged about it, and those ideas fall away, and the good ones stay at the top. So I think that's one of the benefits of a multi-owner, minority-owned business in essence at that time. So
When I look at some of the things that I guess happened in my tenure over the last 10 years or so, I think back very fondly, and it really doesn't relate to the financial end of our business, but the engagement of our business in our 60th anniversary in 2014, which was basically my second year here. As part of our celebration of that, we had our students at Parkland restore a 1954 farm hall, which was the year of our founding. And in that process, we partnered with food banks all around the state of Illinois, and we engaged our customers to purchase things and help engage with the food bank, and we did some matching contributions, and as a part of that, customers who participated got their name thrown in a raffle, and we gave away that 1954 farm hall to Mr. Kluver up north of Paxton, and in the process, we raised funds and donated 1 million meals across Illinois, and I felt like it was one of the first times in our organization that we really connected what we do from a sales standpoint to, what we're helping to do is feed the world, helping our customers feed the world. And we really connected those two, and I felt like we got a very good synergy from that. And I guess I'm just very proud of the organization and the way that we came together to do something for the communities we work in, and something that's connected to the equipment we sell. So that was a great thing. And then,
great promotion.
And then I kind of mentioned the ESOP. One of the most challenging things that in my area of responsibility over 30 years was, how do we let all these guys that have invested their livelihood, their life, and all their money in this organization. And I think when I came in like 93, what did we have, like 12 or 13 owners?
Yeah. Yes.
And
As many as 13.
as many as 13. And yeah, the process always was these guys would work till they retired, and then the company would buy their stock out and pay for that. And as I mentioned before, we didn't have a very good equity position, so there was not a lot of money in the organization to be able to do that. And
Getting in and getting out.
figuring out how to get everybody out was probably the biggest challenge, and in some ways the biggest accomplishment
When it happened.
of my career, because many times when there's an ownership change, the entire organization changes. The culture changes. You get a new owner in, they treat the employees different. They don't have the same focus on the customer. And I think, as you mentioned, being an organization that's always had minority owners, it's allowed us to perpetuate and go forward as we've had change in ownership, to continue to support the values and things that have made us successful. But it's created the challenges in buying those people's shares back. And so, we did that, over the course of time. We were able to allow everybody that wanted to get out of the business to get bought out. And then, we come to probably the last 4 or 5 years, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be out. My brother's going to be out. Instead of having 13 owners, we have 5, and the ownership's concentrated in less people. How do we do that? And we looked for a number of years on what our opportunities to exit would look like. And certainly there's always people that wanted to come in and buy the business. But I don't think our owner group ever felt comfortable of turning it over to some of these organizations that wanted to buy Birkey's out and take over the ownership, because we didn't have the confidence that they would deal the way we would deal with our employees. We didn't have the confidence that they would operate in these small rural communities that have very limited labor forces. And so the ESOP continued to be in the back of my mind for about 5 years, and kind of floated to the surface finally in 21. And we went as far as having an evaluation with the ESOP and actually having them do a study that showed all the owners how it worked and how it was structured. And I think at the point when we all saw that the 5 of us owners saw how this would work over time, not only that we would have an exit strategy, but we had the opportunity to push the ownership in the hands of the employees. Our group was unanimous that this was the approach we needed to take to continue to preserve the legacy and to set us up to move forward.
And the transition, as far as the customer is concerned, was pretty seamless.
Right.
And that was always one of the benefits. And that all happened after I left. But I think that was a beautiful transition for us, for you as a company.
One of the things I related to a while ago when we put the 401k in, it was to maintain ownership or workmanship in the different service areas and parts areas and everything. And we've done another big project that we started. Carl Meyer over at Parkland College worked with me at that time, and we spent many hours in meetings and so forth. And we established this mechanics school at Parkland College. And we got IH to kick in and be a part of that. And it's grown now to that's where we get quite a number of employees is through the Parkland College program. And that costs Birkey some money, because we pay their tuition and buy their tools and buy them a shirt to put on their back and get them started. And the success rate on that, I don't know, you probably got to go back through your records, but we've lost some of them that come and work for us for 4 or 5 years. But a lot of those people that went back home to dad and took over the farm, and now they're good customers, and we're on the inside track with those people. So it's kind of been a win-win deal too.
Yeah, it's always been a challenge for our business where, half of our employees are in the service-related support side of the business. And how do you find those people? We always, all the years I was in business, we were always looking for technicians specifically. And like Gary's talking, the development of the Parkland program, and our focus on that, and we weren't going to be able to get all of the technicians out there that are available, but we wanted to make sure we attracted the best ones. And the program provided us an opportunity to get in touch with those people and be in front of those people. And we also then hired a number of people right out of the universities, people in the ag mech side of the degrees and a 4-year degree. We hired some individuals out of the University of Illinois, and that was a big plus for us too, that not a lot of dealerships were hiring those kind of people. But not everybody wants to go to in a big city and work for a big corporation, and we provided an opportunity for them to stay in the rural area where a lot of them were from, and make them happy in that and the personal side. So it worked out well for us through all that.
Yeah, and as we went through the downturn in 2014, 2015, we weren't adding a lot of headcounts in service, and we came to a point where we were only sponsoring about 3 students in that program, and the program over there was kind of on the verge of shutting down because they weren't getting enough students. And one of the things that, I met with our team, and it's just like, as we come out of this down cycle, everything's going to go back up, and then we're going to be short technicians, and we got to begin actively hiring and adding headcounts. And that was a challenge to persuade our guys in the midst of kind of a downturn that we need to be proactive and begin trying to hire techs. But I said also, we've got to start placing students in this program or we're going to lose it.
Right.
And so it took a while for that to gain some traction. But, we started focusing on that. And one of the things, again, I think we were ahead of the curve as we hired a full-time recruiter. And, we started, as I said, when we hired that recruiter, there was 3 students in the program. If I look at where we are today, we probably have 20-some students in the Parkland program, and then we have some students in Spoon River and some other programs where we're adding technicians there. So, if we can get 25 or 30 students every single year in these programs, it's going to mean, the world for our organization going forward, and it's going to allow us to, continue to grow our business. So one thing that I think that over the years I saw coming in from the outside was the focus we placed on parts and on service as an organization. And a lot of organizations, when I would go to 20 groups and meetings, they were just solely focused on the equipment sale. And I think you've heard from the beginning that Birkey's was service oriented. And I think in a lot of ways that has been something that has allowed us in these cycles to continue to have a business that's sustainable when the market goes down, because we know we can rely on a good parts business, a good service business. We have to work it harder, but I think that's had a lot to do with our success over years, is just how focused we are on our service business.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest is the AxeFlow combine in terms of the ag side. And Gary, you can talk to all that too, but that was a very innovative product, and International Harvester was not one of the leaders in the combining business. We had a lower market share as compared to our competitors, and that combine allowed us to accelerate our position, and it was very, very innovative. I thought the 2+2 was a great innovation tractor. I think the 4-wheel drive that Gary and the group took on early on was very innovative. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on any other products.
Well, one thing also during my time I've seen, and I've seen from where we've gone to guidance being, some kind of an auto steer thing, to now you've got guidance running these things with sub-inch accuracy up and down the fields. And it's to the point that a farmer can't farm and steer the tractor anymore if that guidance is go down. They're kind of shut down in a lot of ways. But along with that, technology has come a whole host of service opportunities, because it always doesn't work the way it should. And being a service technician now is a lot more than repairing the engine or dealing with the transmission or something mechanical. And now so much of it is electrical and tied into these computers. that it takes some very capable service technicians to be able to work on this. From a product standpoint, one area where I think Case IH totally dropped the ball was in the planters. They were almost completely out of the planter business, right, in probably 2010, 2008, 9. And over time, they added the precision planting components into their planter, and we've seen a huge uptick in our planter business. That business has grown again tremendously with that kind of technology in the planters.
I just have to sit back and think of how naive I was, personally. My mid-years period of time through college, I finally decided I think maybe that's what I'd like to do. So I got involved. I really, if I'm going to do this, I want to work for International Harvester. And Dad never told me much of anything I needed to do, but he kind of directed me, or kind of hinted at certain things. And the only thing I can say is, as an example, I go to work for International Harvester. I wanted that job. I was accepted, and I went to work. And the guy went through Jim Ingalls, I think, went through the whole presentation product on presentation about what my job was and everything. And then at the end, he says, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "How much am I making?" At that point, he busted out laughing, because obviously it was really not on my radar at all. I really didn't. I mean, that's the job I wanted, but I look back on that and I think, my goodness. So anyway, I don't know. That doesn't play into anything here, but I thought that
one thing I think our business has incorporated over the years, I don't know much about the last few years, but Floyd Birkey was a very conservative person.
Yeah.
And he was a great teacher to me, working side by side with him. And so I became a very conservative person. And in some ways it was good, but there are other times that maybe we'll do some of these expansions. We would have been better if we would have taken on some others.
Some risk.
Back in the 60s and 70s. But anyhow, I know the first year when I went into business, I went to my local banker over here at Ogden, and I told him I wanted to go into business and so forth and so on. And he said, "Well, I'll loan you the money, but you really probably ought to go up to Rantoul and talk to Paul up there at the bank of Rantoul, because that's who you're going to be dealing with." And but he said, "He won't loan you the money, I will." So I went into the bank in Rantoul and went through the numbers, and everything was fine, and set up the note, and I was in business. However, at the end of the first year, I had a payment due on my note. And there wasn't enough extra money in the till. I had 3 little kids. Mom worked night shift down at the hospital, and we struggled for a couple of years. It was really tough, and so I think if anybody going in has to realize that there's not a pot of tea up here on the counter. That it's pretty tough, and luckily we got through that year. And then I had another friend of mine who was going to sell out his dealer or buy a dealership. And he called me, and he lived in Indianapolis at the time. He says, "Meet me over at the turkey run."
Oh.
And on Sunday morning, have a picnic. And he had a chance to buy into a dealership, and they wanted to know if it was good, bad, or what he should do. And of course, at that point, I'd just gone through the first year, and I wondered maybe I'd make a mistake, but we put in a lot of hours. We done a lot of stuff I would have had to do, but we did it. And then all of a sudden it came about that we were able to make our payments and so forth. But it's tough, because you're going to have these cycles. And that was '68, I think it was. It was kind of a bum year for us.
I guess one thing I wish I knew a little more was when I come in the door, how resistant people are to change. I've been in an organization that was constantly changing and growing, working in a public accounting, working in the corporate world, and it was just a state of constant change. And when I came in, there was a lot of things that really needed to change pretty quickly given the growth that we'd had. And I really wish I'd known what I was going to be in for as far as just the resistance and the reluctance to think differently and do different things. And yet over the years, I think that's what's made Birkey successful, is that we've changed with the times, and we have done a good job of trying to stay ahead of the market and making those adjustments. But it was really a challenge, and it took a while for our organization to kind of get into that mode that any kind of growing organization has to be willing to deal with change and the uncomfortable situation that puts you in when you change. As far as what I pass on, I mean, I've been in that mode now for the last year and a half with Brady as he has succeeded me. There's a lot of stress that goes, we all had stress in our position because the buck kind of stops with you, and I know it weighed heavy on each of us that we're responsible for the well-being of today it's 500 families, and that's a big load to carry as the CEO of the organization. And so you got to find some ways to blow off steam. You need to have somebody that you can talk to about it. And most of the time, that's not one of your peers or somebody at the company. You've got to find an outlet for that, and you've got to find some time to think. You can have your entire day consumed with meetings and interactions, some other things, but one of the things that you're paid to do and expected to do by the board when you're in this position leading the company is how to step back, see what's going on, think about what's going on, and propose how do you help move the organization forward and get people around you to come with you. Yeah. And if you can get people that are around you to come with you, in the end, it makes it all worth it. But it's not easy.
We had a lot of challenges, and I think of one that as we grew ownership, as we brought in more partners, so to speak, corporate shareholders. Most of them came out of an environment where they were sole proprietors, or in a lot of ways had individual autonomy or whatever. But and I think to fit correctly within the structure of a multi-shareholder situation, they had to figure out how to subordinate to the board, and that was a concept that most of them didn't really understand. We had lived through that with our organization because we always had minority owners. We always had to kind of subordinate to what the will of the group was, and so that was a challenge for our group, I think, in the 90s to go through those changes. But obviously, we did that and worked through that.
My first two sales, my first tractor I sold for $6,000. My second sale was a combine for $10,000. That was corn head and bean head, and it blows my mind. And I read through the Agri News and some of these papers, and here's a 4-year-old planter they're wanting $125,000 for. I mean, it blows my mind how much, especially these corn planters. It's just, well, now I guess you can buy a combine and get it up over $1 million.
Yeah, with head.
And I think in my, probably about the 10th year I was in the business, we had one pretty big account, and we had $100,000. I drew $100,000, sold 503 combines and a couple tractors. The difference was a little over $100,000, and we didn't have very many of them in my day. Now most of them are over $100,000. So it's really changed.
I know that, like my dad would always talk about the change and the evolution. He started out, when he left the farm, they had horses. And, that evolution until he left in 1978. But, for me personally, we were selling 66 series tractors, very basic tractors, good quality tractors at the time, but very basic in terms of how they operated. Not a lot of electronics, so to speak. It was all direct. But anyway, sold those when I first started out. And then, so the first 20 years of the 35 years, whatever, those first 20 years I was running a store, so I was very familiar with the product and that evolution, and it had changed a lot in 20 years. But then I came into the administration side more and pulled away from the product more, and the more I pulled away from the product, the more foreign it was. And right toward the end, I remember getting up in a combine, and the farmer said something about, you want to run it for a little bit, and I passed on that because that product was so much different in that last 15 years even. So amazing differences to where we are today.